What's up guys, Kyle here again, and today we're checking out the 1111 Amp Sim. Let's do it! Alright guys, hope you're doing great out there again. As I said, today we are checking out kind of one of the new kids on the block as far as amp sims go. That intro clip that you guys heard was none other than the OTTO Audio 1111 Amp Sim. Now Reed at OTTO Audio has been a follower of my channel essentially since the beginning, and he hit me up months and months ago and let me know that he was working on a really cool amp sim plugin. He said it was going to be kind of unlike anything else that was on the market, and he was really excited, really enthusiastic about it, and he really wanted to have me be one of the first guys to check it out. So fast forward like 7-8 months, here we are. It's on the market, it's released. There's a couple guys who have done videos for it, and now it's my turn to demo this thing. Real quick, if this is your first time here at my channel, what I do is I take awesome high gain amps or amp sims, overdrives, guitar cabinets, speakers, pickups, record them with a simple SM57 setup, or in this case, an unprocessed signal, and give you guys the unprocessed audio on your end. So if you like E standard thrash riffs, drop C hardcore riffs, and dudes with excessive back sweat, you're in the right place. Consider hitting that like button if you liked the video and subscribe on the way out so you don't miss anything else. Thank you. So yeah guys, we're not gonna waste any time. I'm gonna jump right into this plugin and get down to business and show you what this thing is all about. It really is unique in its feature set. There's a lot going on that you don't see in a lot of other plugins. There's a lot of tweakability. If you're a real deal amp guy, much like myself, there's a lot of cool stuff in here that I'm gonna show you to really tweak your tone that are based off of real world modifications that people do to high gain amps. This really is a tone tweaker's paradise. There's not a ton of channels, there's not a ton of models. There's only one amp in here, but that one amp can actually get you a massive variety of tones. So let's dive in, let's check it out. Okay guys, I have the 1111 plugin loaded up, and this is exactly as it will be the first time that you load this thing up. Okay guys, so as you can tell, it's got a really unique thing going on. The first thing that jumps out to me when I open this thing up is you've got a mono stereo setup going on in this plugin. And what that essentially does is it splits the signal left and right and gives you just a little tiny bit of delay. So it gives you the of a double track guitar. So say you're recording your band's next single and you want this big, wide, huge guitar tone, but you're not tight enough to do 4 tracks of the same guitar and make it sound tight. I don't know, I'm just throwing something out there. Or you want things to sound tight or still huge at the same time. You can use this plugin, use that mono stereo setup on either side, and what that'll do is give you the illusion of a quad-tracked guitar and just make it sound really big, really wide. It'll get you that huge sound without having to do too much or really anything in the mixing process. So that's the first thing that stands out. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna turn that off and show you how it sounds without that illusion going on. Talking to Reed, this plugin was not really based on one amp in particular, but the more that we have talked, the more that I have gathered that he's really a fan of the Soldano Avenger, and he's really a fan of the PV5150, and I can kind of hear the voicing of both of those amps built into this plugin, but there's a certain rawness, there's a certain grit to this amp sim that you really don't find on a lot of the other ones. A lot of the other ones are kind of smooth and polished, especially on the top frequencies. This one has a lot of rawness and some grit in the top end that I actually think is maybe not necessarily what I would go for my thrash stuff, but for my down-tuned band that I play drums in, Subdue, we go for a really kind of gnarly raw tone. And this is almost exactly what I would want to try to use for that. It's just really open, raw, aggressive. But yeah, that's not all that it does. That's just the default preset. So let's kind of jump in and start going over some of the controls because there's a lot to go over. Now, the first thing that you see here on the left is this little symbol. And what that is your impedance curve control. So your impedance curve basically emulates the different impedance curves of an actual amp, say plugging into a 16 ohm cab versus a 4 ohm cab versus an 8 ohm cab. There are 9 different impedance curves built in here, and each one changes the sound quite a bit, but it kind of steps up one by one as you go down the line. So here's 1, and here's 9. So as you can see, number 1 is really scooped and number 9 is really mid-forward. You can actually kind of use that to tailor your sound, especially when you're messing around with some of the cab sims in this plugin, as the cab sims kind of vary widely. There's a lot of choices that sound drastically different. So you can really kind of match the impedance curve to the cab sim. Say you have a scooped cab, you want more mids out of it, you like the overall tone, put it on impedance curve 9 and you'll get a more MIDI tone going on. So on top of that, you've got your standard preamp gain, bass, middle, treble, master, presence, and depth. All those are pretty much standard controls. I don't really feel like I need to explain any of those to you. Down here in the bottom right corner, we got the punch. Here's with the punch on. You turn that off. It takes a lot of the brightness and a lot of that grit away. And then the power amp simulation. You take both of those things off. And it sounds a little bit more smoother, a little bit more refined when you have them on. It's got a little more punch and it kind of gives it that signature grit that I was talking about. Over here on the auto audio symbol, you click that. This is where all of your cabinet impulses are. You've got 22 different cabs to choose from, and they vary wildly from cab to cab. So here's cab 1. 2. Immediately, that's just like a completely different tone. It's like some sort of eminence speaker, I would guess, with an HM2 type of flavor or influence on it. Kind of same deal, really nasally thing going on there. Here's cab 5, which is one that I like a lot. All right, so there's that one. Very MIDI with the impedance curve that high. Let's pull it down. And now it's a lot more balanced. See what I mean? You can kind of use the impedance curve to really shape your tone, especially when your cabinets are kind of not doing what you want. So let's go to cab 15. This is another one I like. But again, that one's scoopier. So let's go to impedance curve 9. And it gives me a little bit more of a upper mid response thing going on. Okay, so those are your controls on the front. Down here on the bottom left, we've got the preset bank. He gives you 2 different banks full of presets, so there's tons of different stuff to go through. I also have 2 different small banks of presets that I'm gonna upload and put in the description of this video for you guys to download if you're interested in them. But we'll go over those here in a minute. I wanna get to the rest of the controls on this thing. If you click the tubes here, boom, it takes you to the back of the amp. So we got a lot of controls here to go over. Far left is a mod control. I'm not exactly sure what it does per se, but I do know that it changes the tone. It seems to round it a little bit and add a little bit more mids. So here it is without. Here it is with the mod on. Seems to smooth it just a tad and add just a little bit of mids. This punish control here, this is like a built-in tube screamer with the settings kind of preset. So if you don't want to put an external tube screamer in your signal chain, in your DAW, you can just have that on and it acts as a kind of a TS9, basically dialed how most people would dial it. So here it is without it. Here it is with it on. Not a huge difference, just mainly adds some saturation and tightens up things a little bit. We got a plus 10 dB, which gives you a 10 decibel clean boost in front of the amp. Okay, and then we've got a low boost here, which gives you them big old fatty lows. Not my thing. But if you have a really thin or weak sounding guitar or something like that, I could see how it would help. I'm gonna go back and go to cab number 5 because I was really digging cab 5, impedance curve 5. Let's go to the back again. Okay, so next thing we have a gate, self-explanatory. Over here, very cool thing is power tube selection. You can change the power tube types and they do alter the sound pretty drastically. So we were on 6L6, here's EL34. So, I mean, it's got the crunch of an EL34, it's got the rounded mids of an EL34, and the highs have kind of been cut off. Back over to 6L6. A little bit more aggressive in the top end, a little fatter in the low end, and a little bit scoopy in the mids, just like a 6L6 should be. Here's the KT88. Which just sounds huge. It's kind of like a combination of both the tubes. We're going to leave it on the KT88 because daddy like. All right, so over here to the bias, you can actually adjust the bias of your power tube. So if you want a fatter, fuller sound, dial that bias up. But if you want kind of like a colder sound, like a 5150 or a dual rectifier, as those amps are biased cold, that'll kind of give you more the clanky chunk to your palm mutes and everything. Now, when you dial the bias down, it actually does reduce the output of the amp. So you can go over to the amplitude control, dial that up to compensate for your loss of volume. Next to that, we've got the sag. This emulates the sag in the power section of a tube amp. If you want a lot of saggy lows, dial it up. If you want it nice and tight, dial it down. You know we like it tight here at Belligerent Amateur Studios. Okay, over to the feedback control. There's a presence and depth on the front of the amp. If you have the feedback control turned up, the presence and depth are going to have more of an effect. Whereas if you turn it down or off, if you turn it off, they're not going to do anything. If you turn it down, the presence and the depth will have a lot less of an effect on your tone as you adjust them. When you get like a depth mod to your Soldano SLO or a presence mod to an amp that doesn't have one, what you're doing is you're tapping into the negative feedback circuit of the power amp of that amp. And this control essentially emulates that. So we turn the feedback all the way up. Go to the front, turn that depth down. Okay, so now we have a lot less depth. Turn the presence down. So we take those out. And now those controls don't make any difference. So we'll turn the feedback up to half because I like it, you know, a little bit in between. And then the last control in this little cluster here is the snarl. And that kind of adds like an upper mid, like nastiness to the tone. So if you pull all the way down, we're going to pull it halfway. It just gives kind of like a rawness and a rattiness to it. Okay, up to 3 o'clock. All right, and finally all the way. And then over here, finally, you've got your cab IR section. You can bypass and use external cabinet IRs, but otherwise this shows you the stereo image. Right now we're on mono, so we can't pick 2 different cabs. It'll automatically change them both at the same time. But we've also got individual resonance control. So if we want to get more low end, simulation out of a cabinet, turn those down. And it takes some of that low end away. So, okay, let's turn those up a little bit. All right, I think that is pretty much it for the controls on this thing. So let's check out a couple presets real quick. It's really cool, guys. This is a really unique plugin in the fact that you don't get those tweakability options in most of the plugins, at least not the ones that I've tried. It just seems a little bit more like you're standing in front of a cab than the other plugins because the other plugins are kind of refined, smoothed out in the top end. And this one kind of just is like, it lets all the frequencies stay as if it were a real amp. So it gives you that impression a little bit more that you're actually playing an amp and not just a plugin. So we're gonna go over to my preset banks which I named incorrectly because I'm a stupid idiot and now I can't figure out how to fix it, so I gotta go back and mess with those later. But anyways, let's start with classic thrash. Very much like an 80s thrash tone, like, you know, you hear a lot of chorus and delay on some of those 80s thrash tones to kind of widen them out, so. We are also going to go into the thrash goes brutal. This is kind of like my heavy bass, just meant for like drop tune tones, really nasty stuff, decent amount of saturation, but also a good amount of clarity. Check out another one of my little doodads in here. Thrash goes in dry. So this is kind of like a dry thrash tone, obviously. All right, so that's a nice dry thrash tone if you're trying to get really articulate with things. Okay, so let's go over to the thrasheration. This is like a saturated thrash tone. Okay, so those are my main presets. I kind of have a secondary set of presets here. Belligerently amateur chugs. This is just made for just chugging, just getting a nasty, full, thick chug sound. And then we also have thrash goes British. Which was me kind of attempting to make this very American sounding plugin sound a little bit more martially. So I think that came out pretty cool. And then this one is actually supposed to be Swedish. Thrash goes Swedish, but somehow I messed up the naming of the plugin. So obviously very HM2 heavy on that tone. That was kind of one just for fun. So yeah, I'm gonna grab a drop C guitar real quick and just show you how this thing sounds for kind of the brutal tones. It just sounds nasty. It's just really raw, really gritty, really aggressive. Let's try one more of my presets here. How about just thrasheration? It just sounds really nasty. It's more raw than most of the other plugins that I've tried for sure. It's got this real amp type thing to it. Actually, I just got an idea. We're gonna try something for the first time. I'm gonna try something. All right, guys, so I'm gonna try something that I have never tried before with this plugin. And that is, I'm gonna try to run it through both a solid state power amp and a tube power amp of the amp that essentially this thing is kind of based off of, which is a Soldano Avenger, which I have right here. I've never tried to do this with a plugin before. I've heard of other people doing it and having success. With how raw this sounds, I was really kind of curious how it would translate coming through a real cab. So I've got an Ampeg V412 with UK Vintage 30s here. I've got my Seymour Duncan power stage, and then we're also gonna try to run it through the Soldano Avenger power section as well. and just kind of see how this thing sounds used in a like real world scenario. I've always been curious about that, and with the rawness of this plugin, I was curious how it would translate. So I have a preset here that I messed around with a little bit right before I started filming, so I think I have this dialed in a really ideal way. We have the IRs bypassed, we have the power amp bypassed as well. So really you're hearing whatever voicing that the Duncan power stage will add. It shouldn't add anything really because they're supposed to be an extremely clean power amp. And then when we go over to the Soldano Avenger, you're gonna hear the voicing of the power amp of the Avenger. So without further ado, I've got an SM57 on this V30. Let's see how it sounds. That sounds pretty convincing. It actually, one of the crazy things about it is it has like a sag, almost like a delay, but not in the timing because I adjusted all those settings, but just like the way that the low end reacts is very much amp-like. And the voicing does remind me of the Avenger a bit. It's got that very like, it's pretty cool. All right, guys, so I now have this thing pumping through the power section of the Soldano Avenger 100 here. We've got, let's see how that sounds. So it definitely reminds me of the Avenger and the way that it reacts on the low end and the way that the mids are voiced. It still has that kind of nasally mid thing going on that the Avenger definitely does have. The reaction is slow, like obviously, like I said, it's not something that I would use for like my thrash tones, but for like a doomier, sludgier, lower tune project, even one of my hardcore bands, I could definitely see that tone sounding right at home, especially paired up with something like a 5150, something a little tighter, a little colder, and this thing has some fatness, some chunk, and just some like real low mid growl to it to really kind of just give you that full spectrum of like down-tuned tone. If you just wanted to run a laptop rig with a power stage, you could easily get away with that for sure. That was a pretty interesting little experiment. But anyways, back upstairs. All right, guys, so that is pretty much gonna do it for me today on this plugin. Real quick, before we end this video though, Reed at OTTO Audio and myself have something to offer you guys. We are gonna give away 3 licenses to this plugin to you, to the viewers on my channel. All that you guys have to do in order to qualify for this giveaway is to 1, go to ottoaudio.net, 2, download the 14-day free trial and check it out, 3, make your own preset in that 14-day trial, and 4, you are gonna come up with a preset name, which you will then send to Reed and myself for us to judge the best and most creative and most hilarious preset names. For example, I made a preset called It Goes to 11, where I put every single dial at 11. It's completely useless, but it's funny. So in turn, you guys, it doesn't have to be a ridiculous preset, but the name, just come up with something creative and funny. Reed and myself will judge it, and we will pick the top 3 that we like the most. we will give those 3 people free licenses to this plugin. Now, everyone else, if you want to purchase the plugin, down in the description of the video, I will put my link, and if you use my affiliate code ThrashDamon, you will get 50% off of the initial purchase. This plugin comes at $111.11, 11. Apparently, Reed really likes the number 1. The plugin is $111.11. You use my code ThrashDamon, you will get 50% off of that. Now, that is not a permanent thing. That is a limited time offer. We don't know exactly how long we're gonna run it, so essentially, if you snooze, you lose. If you wanna grab this plugin, now's the time to do it because you'll get 50% off if you use that code. But yeah, overall, my thoughts on this plugin are it's really unique. It's got its own thing going. There's definitely a lot more rawness to the tone. There's a bit of a grit to it that just makes it sound nasty, especially for lower tune stuff. Now, if you're going for, like the super thrashy stuff like I tend to play sometimes, I play a lot of hardcore drop C riffs and stuff. I think it's great for that stuff, but the thrashy stuff, the low end, maybe isn't quite quick enough for me. And also the cabinet IRs. There were only a couple that I really gelled with, and I can appreciate that there's a lot of variance in there, but I would like to see a couple more like standardly voiced IR models, just because there were some that I was struggling to get along with, and then there were some that I really liked. So overall, those are really my only critiques. Hope that you guys enjoyed this. Hope you found it helpful. What did you think about the tones? What did you think about the plugin interface? I'm really curious. If you have downloaded the demo and tried this thing already, what are your thoughts on it? Drop some comments on this video and meet me down there, and I'll be chatting it up with you. Also, down in the description of this video are my Sweetwater affiliate links and my Patreon, which both massively help me out if you guys visit those. My Facebook group and Discord server links are also down in the description of this video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Kyle here again, and we'll see you next time.